I was just asking for a sandwich, but that man offered me a six-figure salary to become his adopted granddaughter. Can you imagine? In just 48 hours, I went from being a homeless beggar on the gritty streets of LA to residing in a luxurious Beverly Hills estate. The air was dense with smog and the stench of traffic, and the scorching sun beat down on me, amplifying my despair and weakness. I was so hungry and tired, but that moment marked the beginning of an unbelievable journey. Before we begin, I want to tell you that this story comes directly from a subscriber, Chloe from Seattle, who lived through this incredibly bizarre and terrifying experience. If you have a true story you think deserves to be told on the channel, let me know in the comments below. Your experience could be the next one we feature. My name is Chloe Miller, and I'm 23 years old. Just a few months ago, I was a student at Seattle University, studying graphic design. I had dreams of creating beautiful art, of building a career that would make my mom proud. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and mine came in the form of mounting student loan debt and the overwhelming pressure to succeed. I felt like I was drowning, so when an opportunity for an internship in Los Angeles came up, I grabbed it. I packed my bags, said a hopeful goodbye to my mom, and drove south, thinking this was my big break. But the internship fell through. The company downsized before I even started, and suddenly, I was in a city I didn't know, with no job, no income, and rapidly depleting savings. I couldn't afford my rent, and within weeks I was evicted. I slept in my car until it got towed, and then I was on the streets. The shame was crushing. How could I call my mom? She's a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse's aide just to put me through school. She sacrificed everything for me, and here I was, a college dropout who couldn't even feed herself. I hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days, surviving on scraps and the occasional dollar from panhandling. My stomach ached constantly, and my mind was foggy from hunger. I felt like a total failure, a burden to everyone around me. The guilt ate at me more than the hunger. I'd see other people my age laughing in coffee shops, living their lives, and I'd wonder where I went wrong. I was so alone, so desperate, that I started to forget what it felt like to be full, to be safe. My world had shrunk to the basic need for food and shelter. I remember walking through downtown LA, the smog clinging to my clothes, the sun beating down relentlessly. I was dizzy, my hands shaking, and I knew I had to do something. I had to swallow my pride. I saw a fancy restaurant called the Golden Fork, with people dining outdoors, looking happy and carefree. I decided to approach someone who seemed kind, an elderly man sitting alone, hoping he might have some leftovers or spare change. I was terrified of being yelled at or thrown out by security, but I had no other choice. That decision, born from pure desperation, changed everything. I walked towards the Golden Fork, my heart pounding in my chest. The restaurant was so elegant, so out of place with my ragged clothes and unwashed hair. I focused on the elderly man sitting alone at an outdoor table. He wore a pristine white suit and had an air of quiet authority, like someone who commanded respect without even trying. My hands were trembling as I approached him, my voice barely a whisper. "Excuse me, sir," I stammered. "I'm so hungry. Could you spare any food? Anything at all?" I braced myself for rejection, for him to wave me away like so many others had. But he didn't. He looked up, and his eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto mine. He didn't seem disgusted or angry. He was studying me, as if appraising a piece of art. "Sit down," he said, his voice calm and firm. I hesitated, but the kindness in his tone made me obey. I sank into the chair opposite him, feeling the crisp linen under my fingers. "What's your name?" he asked. "Chloe," I replied, my voice shaking. "Chloe Miller." He nodded slowly. "I am Mr. Wallace Sterling." Then he dropped the bombshell. He didn't offer me a meal. Instead, he said, "I don't offer leftovers. I offer a life." I thought I must be hallucinating from hunger. He explained that he would give me a $250,000 annual salary, cover all my student loan debts, and provide me with a penthouse in Los Angeles. All on one condition. I had to move into his estate and publicly assume the role of his long-lost granddaughter, Amelia. He told me that his real granddaughter, Amelia, had vanished years ago, and he needed someone to fulfill the terms of a family trust to secure his legacy. The annual audit was next month, and the trust required her presence. My mind was reeling. This had to be a scam or some cruel joke. "Sir, this is a joke, right?" I managed to say, my voice cracking. "I'm not an actress. I can't do this." Mr. Sterling's expression didn't change. "This is very serious, Chloe. You look remarkably like her. It's a purely transactional arrangement. You follow my rules, play the part, and you are set for life. You say the words I write, you go where I tell you you are seen. That is all." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. It sounded too good to be true, but also terrifying. What would I have to give up? My identity? My freedom? I asked the question that was burning in my mind, and if I say no... He looked at me, his gaze unwavering. "Then you leave, and I find another girl before the sun sets. The offer is only valid for the next 5 minutes." 5 minutes? I had 5 minutes to decide between continuing my life of starvation and despair or accepting this surreal proposal that promised everything but felt like selling my soul. The clock was ticking, and every second felt like an eternity. I walked towards the Golden Fork, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The restaurant was this beacon of luxury in the middle of the gritty city, and I felt completely out of place. My eyes landed on an elderly man sitting alone at an outdoor table. He was dressed in a crisp white suit, and he had this calm, powerful presence about him. He seemed kind, or at least not threatening. I gathered all my courage and approached him, my voice shaky and weak from hunger. "Excuse me, sir," I said, my words barely audible. "I'm so hungry. Could you spare any food? Anything would help." I expected him to dismiss me or call security, but instead, he gestured for me to sit down. I was so stunned, I just obeyed, sinking into the chair opposite him. He introduced himself as Mr. Wallace Sterling, and then he dropped the bombshell. He didn't offer me a sandwich or leftovers. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "I don't offer leftovers. I offer a life." I thought I was hallucinating from hunger. He explained that he would give me a $250,000 annual salary, cover all my debts, and provide me with a penthouse in L.A. But there was one condition. I had to move into his estate and publicly become his granddaughter, Amelia. He said his real granddaughter had vanished, and he needed someone to fulfill the terms of a family trust for an upcoming audit. My mind was racing. This had to be a trick. I stammered, "Sir, this is a joke, right? I'm not an actress. I can't do this." His expression didn't change. He was so serious. He said, "This is very serious, Chloe. You look remarkably like her. It's a purely transactional arrangement. You follow my rules, play the part, and you are set for life. You say the words I write, you go where I tell you you are seen. That is all." I felt a cold dread wash over me. It sounded too good to be true, but also terrifying. What would I have to give up? My identity? My freedom? I had to ask, and if I say no? He replied calmly, "Then you leave, and I find another girl before the sun sets. The offer is only valid for the next 5 minutes." 5 minutes? That's all I had to decide between continuing my life of starvation and shame or accepting the surreal proposal that promised everything but felt like I was selling my soul. The weight of that decision pressed down on me, and I could barely breathe. Moving into Mr. Sterling's estate was like stepping into a beautiful, frozen dream. The mansion was a sprawling classic Hollywood masterpiece, all white walls and grand columns, but it felt more like a museum than a home. From the moment I passed through the wrought iron gates, I was struck by the silence. It was oppressive, heavy, as if the very air was holding its breath. The sun shone brightly outside, but inside, the air was always cold, sending chills down my spine no matter how many layers I wore. The staff moved like ghosts, gliding through the halls without a sound, their eyes always downcast, never meeting mine. They called me Miss Amelia from day one, even when Mr. Sterling wasn't around, and it sent a shiver through me every time. It was as if they had been programmed to see me as her, and I started to wonder if I was losing myself in this charade. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced people, generations of Sterlings, who never seemed to smile. But one painting caught my eye every time I passed it. A young woman with my face, my eyes, my hair. Amelia. She looked so much like me it was uncanny, but her expression was haunted, almost fearful. I found myself staring at it for hours, trying to decipher the secrets in her eyes. Mr. Sterling had strict rules for my new life. I was to wear only white, as he said it was Amelia's favorite color. It felt like I was being dressed for a part in a play, my own identity erased bit by bit. I complied, but each white dress felt like a costume, a layer of someone else's skin I was forced to wear. The luxury was overwhelming. Silken sheets, gourmet meals served on silver platters, a closet full of designer clothes, but it all felt hollow. I was living a lie, and the guilt gnawed at me constantly. I missed my mom, but my calls to her were brief and filled with half-truths. I told her I had landed an amazing job as a personal assistant to a wealthy businessman, that I was safe and happy. But every time I heard her relieved voice, I felt like a fraud. The isolation was crushing. I had no one to talk to, no one to confide in. The staff avoided me, and Mr. Sterling was distant, only interacting with me during training sessions, where he drilled me on Amelia's backstory, her mannerisms, her likes and dislikes. It was during one of these sessions that I overheard something that made my blood run cold. I was waiting in the drawing room when Mr. Sterling and his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Mr. Graves, were speaking in hushed tones in the hallway. I caught fragments of their conversation. The original contract, we can't let the will be contested. She needs to be perfect. Their voices were low and urgent, and when they noticed me, they fell silent immediately. Mr. Sterling gave me a tight smile and changed the subject, but the words echoed in my mind. What contract? What will? I started to feel like I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand. The mystery deepened a few days later when I was exploring the library. It was a vast room filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, smelling of old leather and dust. I was trying to find something to read, anything to distract myself from the growing unease. As I ran my fingers along the spines, I noticed a heavy leather-bound book that seemed out of place. It was titled The History of Sterling Plates, but when I pulled it out, something clattered to the floor behind it. I reached behind the book and found a small, tarnished silver locket. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the initials AS engraved on the front. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of Amelia, the same girl from the portrait, but she looked younger and happier. And tucked behind the photo was a tiny, folded piece of paper. I unfolded it carefully, and the handwritten note sent a jolt of fear through me. I know what he did. Don't trust the water. I stared at those words, my mind racing. What did he do? Who wrote this? Was it from Amelia? And what did it mean about the water? I thought about the decorative indoor fountain in Mr. Sterling's private wing, the one he seemed so proud of. I had always found it eerie, the way the water trickled endlessly, a constant reminder of the silence it broke. Now it felt like a threat. I hid the locket in my pocket, my hands shaking. This was more than just a business arrangement. Something was terribly wrong. I was living in a house of secrets, and I was afraid I was becoming one of them. The opulence around me suddenly felt like a gilded cage, and I knew I had to find out the truth before I was trapped forever. The note from the locket haunted me. I know what he did. Don't trust the water. Those words played over and over in my mind, a constant, terrifying whisper. I thought about the indoor fountain in Mr. Sterling's private wing, the one he always seemed to admire. It was a beautiful, serene feature, with water cascading gently over smooth stones, but now it felt sinister. What secret was hidden behind that soothing sound? I had to find out. Late that night, when the mansion was steeped in an unnatural silence, I crept into Mr. Sterling's wing. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure it would echo through the halls. The fountain was illuminated by a soft, ghostly light, the water glistening as it flowed. I remembered the note, and I knew I had to look behind it. I approached cautiously, my hands trembling. I ran my fingers along the base of the fountain, feeling for anything unusual. Then, I found it, a loose stone panel, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I pried it open with my fingers, my breath catching in my throat. Behind the panel was a small, damp space, and inside, I found a sealed plastic box. I pulled it out, my hands shaking. I opened it carefully, and inside were stacks of old documents. I took them back to my room, my pulse racing. Under the dim light of my bedside lamp, I started reading. They were hospital records, Mr. Wallace Sterling's medical files. The diagnoses were clear. He was suffering from a rare, terminal neurological disorder. The prognosis was grim. He had only months to live, if that. My stomach churned as I realized the truth. He wasn't just an eccentric old man, he was dying. But that wasn't the only revelation. Mixed in with the medical records were legal documents related to the family trust. I read through them, my eyes widening with each page. The trust wasn't about an annual audit at all. It stated that control of the entire Sterling Plates restaurant chain would pass immediately to Amelia Sterling upon Mr. Sterling's confirmed incapacitation or death. There was a clause that if no direct heir was present, the chain would be dissolved and its assets given to a public charity. He hadn't just needed a placeholder for an audit. He needed a legal heir to take over before he died, to prevent the chain from falling into the hands of a charity that might expose something. But what? I felt a mix of anger and fear. He had lied to me from the start. This was about securing his legacy, but why so desperately? I had to confront him. I couldn't live this lie any longer. The next morning, I found him in the drawing room, sipping tea as if everything was normal. I walked in, the documents clutched in my hand. My voice was steady, but inside I was trembling. "You're dying," I said, placing the hospital records on the table in front of him. "And the trust gives everything to Amelia the moment you're gone. You didn't just need a placeholder, you needed a successor. You knew I'd look like her, didn't you?" Mr. Sterling looked up, his expression calm, almost amused. He didn't seem surprised. "Bravo, Chloe," he said, setting down his teacup. "You're sharper than I gave you credit for. And Amelia was always an intelligent girl. But you didn't see the full picture." He leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "The restaurant chain, Sterling Plates, isn't just a business. It's the family's secret, dark legacy." He began to explain, his voice low and measured. The real Amelia, his granddaughter, had run away because she discovered the truth. Sterling Plates was built on deeply unethical and illegal practices, widespread labor exploitation, including underpaid and undocumented workers, and massive environmental crimes, like dumping hazardous waste illegally. She had wanted to expose him, to bring it all to light, but he managed to silence her by threatening her and those she cared about. She disappeared, but he feared she would resurface one day. His motivation wasn't simple greed. He was desperate to protect the family name and his legacy from the scandal that would erupt if the truth came out. If the chain was dissolved into a charity, as the trust required without an heir, the new management would inevitably uncover the crimes during the transition. He needed an Amelia to quietly inherit and maintain the status quo, to keep the secrets buried. He chose me not only because I resembled her, but because I was desperate and alone, believing I would be too grateful and compliant to question him. I stood there, stunned. The luxurious life he offered was built on suffering and corruption. I felt sick to my stomach. I had been willing to sell my soul for security, but now I realized the price was too high. I was part of something monstrous, and I had to get out. But how? I was trapped in his web, and if I left, he would find someone else, and the cycle would continue. I knew then that I couldn't just walk away. I had to expose him. I knew I was trapped. If I tried to expose Mr. Sterling, his lawyers would crush me, painting me as a fraud who willingly participated in the scheme. I had to be smarter. I realized that as the successor, I had authority. I could use Amelia's identity to get to the one place where the truth mattered, the Trust's Legal Oversight Committee in New York. I started secretly gathering evidence. I took pictures of the hospital records proving his terminal illness, the original trust documents showing the transfer of power, and I even found hidden files in his study detailing the labor violations and environmental crimes, invoices for illegal dumping, payroll records showing underpaid workers. It was all there, a tapestry of corruption. I packed everything into a digital drive and hid it in my things. Then, using my new authority as Amelia, I arranged a business trip to New York, telling Mr. Sterling I needed to familiarize myself with the corporate headquarters ahead of the audit. He seemed pleased, thinking I was finally embracing my role. But my heart was pounding with every lie I told. The day of my departure, I arrived at the private jet hangar, my bags filled with the evidence. I was so close to freedom, to doing the right thing. But just as I was about to board, Mr. Sterling's lawyer, Mr. Graves, appeared, his face like stone. He had been tipped off by a suspicious staff member. "Amelia," he said, his voice cold. "Or should I call you Chloe? Where do you think you're going? This trip wasn't on the schedule." If you proceed, we will have you arrested for fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. My knees felt weak, but I remember the hospital records. I stood my ground, pulling out a copy of the documents. According to the trust, upon Mr. Sterling's incapacitation, Amelia becomes the acting head. These medical records prove he is terminally ill and mentally incapacitated. As of this moment, I am in charge. You work for me, Mr. Graves, and I am going to New York. His eyes widened as he read the papers. He knew he was defeated, at least for now. He stepped back, and I boarded the jet, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. In New York, I went straight to the trust committee. I met with the head, a stern woman named Mrs. Albright, and laid out everything. The fraud of my identity, Mr. Sterling's illness, and the horrific crimes behind Sterling plates. I showed her the evidence, the documents, the photos, the records. She was horrified but impressed by my courage. The committee acted swiftly. They froze all assets and launched an immediate investigation. The scandal exploded in the news. Sterling Plates was exposed for its illegal practices, and Mr. Sterling was legally removed from control due to his incapacity. The trust, forced to acknowledge the crimes, began dissolving the chain and using the remaining assets to fund a new charity focused on environmental cleanup and labor rights. As for me, I was investigated for my role, but I was granted full immunity in exchange for my testimony. I walked away debt-free, with a small severance package that felt like a token of justice. But more importantly, I walked away with my integrity intact. I had chosen truth over luxury, and that was worth more than any mansion. I was free, not just from the lies, but from the shame that had haunted me. I had finally done something that would make my mom proud, not because I was rich, but because I was right. Looking back on this entire experience, I realize how much I changed. I walked into that mansion a starving, desperate girl who was willing to compromise anything, my name, my identity, my morals, just for a chance at survival. I thought that being poor was the worst thing that could happen to me, that financial security was the ultimate goal. But I walked out a different woman. I learned that real failure isn't about how empty your pockets are. It's about how empty your soul becomes when you sacrifice your integrity. Choosing to expose Mr. Sterling and walk away from that life of luxury was the hardest decision I've ever made, but it was also the most liberating. I finally understood that my self-respect was the only thing of true value, and no amount of money could ever replace that. After everything settled, I knew I had to make things right with my mom. I took the small severance I received and did two things that truly mattered. First, I bought her a plane ticket and booked a quiet, cozy seaside retreat for both of us. When I saw her there, watching the ocean with tears in her eyes, finally relaxed and not worried about bills or work, I knew I had done something right. I told her, I may not be rich, but I finally fixed things. We're okay now. And for the first time in years, I believed it. Second, I re-enrolled in university, but this time, I chose journalism. I wanted to use my voice to uncover the truth, to expose injustices like the ones I witnessed. I never want anyone to feel as powerless as I did, and if I can help give a voice to the voiceless, then my own struggles will have meant something. So, to anyone watching this who feels like they're backed into a corner, who thinks that compromising their values is the only way out, please remember this: the easiest path is often the most expensive. You can never afford to sell your soul, even if the price is $250,000 a year. The true freedom in life isn't about what you own, but what you refuse to compromise. Hold on to your integrity, because in the end, it's the only thing that truly belongs to you. This is my story, the story of a young woman who was given a golden cage and found the courage to open the door, trading a life of luxury built on lies for the hard, beautiful freedom of the truth. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed and kept the secret, or would you have chosen the same path? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you were captivated by this journey and want to hear more jaw-dropping true stories like mine, please hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good mystery, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. Thank you for watching, for sharing my journey, and for being the best community a channel could ask for. Until the next video, keep your eyes open, and never stop fighting for what's right.